Tim, and welcome back to Watches Live. It's our only show on this channel, so if you're watching, you're in the right place. Welcome from around the world to our live audience. Guys, thank you for bearing with me the last 24 hours. I've been a bit under the weather, but I'm back and flying above the clouds with some of the best watches I've had in a while. If there's a theme tonight, it's rivalries and Breitling. You'll see. Also, click to win my watch. Win the 145022, the Vintage Omega Speedmaster Professional February giveaway watch, absolutely free, but you got to be in it to win it, and this is going to be my last broadcast before the announcement. So, joining me, I can see as a 28, Eddie Landsberg, Andrew, Hale Bop, Justin Hill, asking, am I feeling better? Yes, and thank you for asking me. Let me start with a bang. A watch that I shorted you in the past, once the thumbnail watch for the show and notoriously not featured. That infamy is corrected here. From 2012 to the present, the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Tourbillon Extra-Thin, 41 millimeters in stainless steel and only 9 millimeters thick as my caliper reads, an extraordinary Audemars Piguet tourbillon, 70-hour power reserve, and an exquisite case-back power reserve indicator ghosting on the reverse side, if we can focus in on the case back right there, ghosting on the caseback mini power reserve indicator on caliber 2924. The movement beaten away at 3 Hertz. Let's focus right in on that tourbillon bridge. You can see the details of an exquisite black polished tourbillon cage, black polished tourbillon bridge, over coil hairspring done the old-fashioned way. AP does have several different levels of finish, and what you see on, for example, a 15400 is not what you get on the jumbo or some of the high horology pieces. This is AP finish as you imagine it, exclusively manual, and it's the petite tapisserie, not the grande tapisserie. This is the hobnail dial of the jumbo, not the 15500. Gorgeous with white gold hands and baton indices. This is a watch you can wear easily. Now, it is a big 41, and I'm going to throw it on the wrist so you can get a sense of it. I find it actually wears larger on the wrist than my 43 millimeter Zinn Easy M11. So this is what it looks like if you've got a skinny 16 centimeter wrist and you want to wear a Royal Oak Tourbillon Extra-Thin. Reference 26510ST. It is big, it is broad, and with the exception of its thickness, which it has not, it is basically the size of an offshore on your wrist. So be prepared and bring plenty of skin and plenty of coin to wear this one. But oh, is it worth it? And screw down crown 50 meters. I would caution you to screw down the crown, but this is a swimmable sports tourbillon. Jumping into the chat box, I can see we've got Steve Bowden joining, Eric Cecil, Xavier, we have Louis, we have Michael N, we have Christopher P, and we have Kevin Wiltshire joining from Australia. He wins the award for early riser. I could see that guitar guy joining in. I'm not quite that guitar guy yet, but I'm working on it. And we've got Big Mike 3541, Dave the Watch Guy, and Sean M joining in just now. Willie Pete saying poorly timed smudge. Do you want to see it one more time without the smudge? I have fewer but better watches tonight, so I can show a watch twice. Okay, if you missed the Royal Oak Extra-Thin tourbillon, I'm not going to apply any spit shine to that, so if the smudge is there and I can't get it with the microfiber, it's going to be there until we have a chance to ship the watch. But that smudge might be a little too persistent to remove. Wonderful watch, AP as you imagine it. And I can see right here, we've got Turk YachtMaster joining us from Istanbul, and he's a fan of the broadcast. Excellent. Okay, jumping into a watch that is accessible and high horology at the same time. We don't talk about GP much on this show, but Girard Perregaux of La Chaux-de-Fonds needs to be discussed. They've been making their own movements for a long time. They've been making high-end watches for a long time, and since 1906, they've been making their own cases. They have a heritage that dates back to 1791, and this watch, dating back to the early 2000s, is a 100-piece Girard Perregaux Chronograph Sport USA limited edition of 100 pieces, 40 millimeters in stainless steel with a carbon fiber dial and a few Scuderia references. It's not a Scuderia Ferrari watch. They did make those. This is actually a USA special edition of 100 pieces in steel with a Girard Perregaux manufacturer caliber 3370 automatic chronograph. The watch only 12.6 millimeters thick, 52.5 lug to lug, and 40 millimeters in diameter. is a sub $4,000, I would even say sub $3,500 Daytona alternative. It has just as much motorsports cool stance, presence, and pedigree, but it also has accessibility, and it costs roughly 1/5 or 1/4 the amount people are spending for the steel ceramic Daytona these days, depending on paper's provenance and condition. This one's in outstanding condition with impeccable provenance, and you can see on my wrist, it really does serve the purpose of a Daytona in stance, in feel, in quality, and GP movement's just a bit more thin and fine. Can we focus on the dial a bit more, guys, than what you'll get from Rolex? I'm not going to pretend this is a stature alternative or a status alternative to the Daytona, but if you're in it for the watches and you love watches and cars, what a great way to wear a fun watch with a manufacturer movement and case for under $3,500. I still have a little bit of sniffle. I'm still getting over it, and I can see Hayden asking, is that a carbon fiber dial? It is. Good spot. And I can see right here, we've got 53 Capri Drive, we've got ZMT, we've got Eddie L, we've got Perfect 7, and let me fix that zoom. Barry BKT, he's a fan. All right, I can see Mike Stone. Hi, Tim. Great to join you tonight. Mike, thank you for joining me. All right, I mentioned there's some Breitling in this episode, and I'm going to start with my favorite. I am a huge complication buff. I love them. I've owned them. I've worn them many times, and this is about as good as the bang for your buck gets. For about $4,700, you're looking at a Quantième B6 Teal calendar, which is a semi-perpetual that requires correction only once every 1,461 days during the summer Olympic year. So it's not an annual, and it's not quite a perpetual. It is a rare perpetual style movement made by Breitling that splits the difference between a QP and an annual. Now, this is the Montbriand Olympus, a watch from 2005 that celebrates the legacy of Breitling's original location in Le Chaux-de-Fonds, Rue Montbriand. We get super close. You can see a handsome, polished, relieved image of the Le Chaux-de-Fonds Rue Montbriand Breitling factory, which was opened in 1892 and closed in the late 70s. You can see the name of Leon Breitling in Baroque calligraphy and a beautiful blasted base underneath all that. This watch, 41.5 millimeters in diameter, has a complex calendar, a moon phase for romance, a chronograph, automatic winding, COSC chronometer, stainless steel case, and you have that bidirectional rotating calculator-style bezel that you can use for multiplication, division, and if you're patient and you apply yourself, some higher order calculations. It's also a fully loomed dial, numerals and hands. So this winds up being a remarkably complex semi-perpetual calendar moon phase chronometer chronograph for about $4,700. And you can see 48 millimeters lug to lug. See the lug to lug span on my wrist, 16 centimeters. This is an easy watch to wear. It's not as thick as it looks. It's about 15.5 millimeters, so no shirt sleeves, but jacket cuffs are just fine. And that's a lot of Breitling for your money. It's also a Breitling that breaks the mold. It's not quite like the other watches they made in the 2000s. And if you take a close look, you can see it features a wonderful nod to the original mid-1950s Navitimers with that beaded rather than knurled bevel. A lovely watch. This is the Montbriand Olympus, an Olympian in 41.5 millimeters. Now jumping into another Breitling, this one's probably going to be a bit more mainstream. One of the most attractive Navitimer models of recent years. This case is stamped 2017, and well, it may as well be a cape because this is a watch for a superhero. Iconic, heroic, timeless. This is the Breitling. If you're going to own one, get a Navitimer. Make it a fair case size, not too big, not too small. It was never traditionally a tiny watch, and at 42 millimeters, this is just the right size. A timepiece featuring an all-polished steel case with the traditional slim mid-case, squared-off lugs, the bidirectional rotating calculator bezel, and a sensational, explosive sunburst dial with all applique indices. Chronograph, calculator, chronometer, all of that with a wonderful wrist presence and a very wearable size on the wrist, only 47.5 millimeters lug to lug. So if you've got that smaller wrist, even if you can't quite accommodate a moonwatch, this is your moonwatch alternative. It's a little thicker, but it fits wonderfully across the wrist. This is as good as a Navitimer gets. Caliber 13, it's a 7750 in chronometer spec, so tank tough and super precise. Still getting through it, guys. Thanks for joining me and bearing with me. I can see RX, and I can see Pet Shop Boy. Do you think Rolex will release a gold ceramic Daytona on a bracelet? Well, they've got a platinum ceramic Daytona on a bracelet, possibly, but I think you're going to wait for the next generation of Daytona to see any new versions. I think before a new version comes out, you're going to see an all-new version of the watch. We've had the 6-digit reference with few changes since 2000. It's time. I could see that perhaps being a launch model for the next generation Daytona. Okay, and I could see Barry is saying something about Josh. Tim, will you tell Josh I need only 2% more off on a watch deal we are working on? I know he will listen to you. I'll do what I can. I'll put in a good word. And while I wait on that, I'm going to show you a Breitling by another name. This is a Breitling-powered Tudor. Launched in 2017, the Heritage Black Bay chronograph is a stealthy application of the Breitling B01. Now, it's a 70-hour power reserve, COSC chronometer, hacking seconds, quick set date, sheathed in the skin of a Black Bay chrono. Now, it's not quite a dive watch. If you note, there's no rotating bezel. It's somewhere between a diver and a Daytona. And if I really had to pin it down, I would say it's probably a cross between the look of a vintage Tudor sub, we can focus in a little bit more, a vintage Tudor sub and a late 60s Daytona or an early 70s Tudor chrono. This is a watch that kind of crosses genres. It's a rare Black Bay that's not a diver, though by no means the only one. And I appreciate the fact that Tudor stuck with the 41mm case size when they went full chrono. Having established the 43 with the Black Bay bronze, I was afraid this watch would be huge, but at 41mm, it wears well. Another great Daytona alternative for a lot less money. This is a timepiece that has a lot of character and instant accessibility with Tudor cachet and resale value. I like the wrist presence. It's not my favorite budget chrono on the table tonight. I would go with the Girard Perregaux, but for folks who want a Rolex Tudor product, there may be no alternative to this one in this price point. Quirk of these in-house, or I should say, sophisticated caliber Tudors, since this is not an in-house, but get close to the dial, you can see there's a shield on the dial, so that's the post-1968 Tudor logo, but on the crowns, and you'll see this on the other Black Bays, there is a Tudor rose, the pre-1968 Tudor logo. Quirky, and a point to note, you'll know when you see older Black Bays with the ETA calibers, they have the rose on the dial too. Jumping into the chat box, I could see we have a comment, that could be my favorite Breitling. Rich Buddy is asking, what's in that Breitling? Which one are we talking about? The blue dial, it's a 7750 COSC spec. And I could see Uptick Watch Reviews is a fan of the blue dial Breitling Heritage chronograph. It is the Navitimer Heritage chronograph that you just saw. Okay, let's jump to something super crazy because I want to mix in the high horology and the accessible watches. A watch that sells for about $38,000, $39,000 pre-owned. New for 2013, this is the Freak Cruiser from Ulysse Nardin. 45mm or 44.5 as I measure it. It features a baguette movement that is effectively one and the same, get super close guys, as the UN caliber 205. You can see the entire drivetrain of the watch right up to the free sprung balance, silicone hairspring, double direct impulse silicone escape wheels. If you can see that guys, there are 2 escape wheels and they only impulse the balance in its direction of travel. Skeletonized wheels for maximum mass reduction, unlubricated for longevity, long intervals between service. UN, via its Sigatech subsidiary, makes all of its silicone in-house. Note that there's a sapphire for the hour track just below the hand. Note that there is a hand with lume for the hours, and the minute hand is one and the same as the movement. You can see it uses a settable movement as its minute hand, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works. Now, since the very first Freak, and not since the very first Freak, I should say, has there been a lack of a lock on the dial. Now, the lock raises, it says Freak at 6 o'clock, and the first 2001 Freak was too easy to set. The bezel sets the watch, so if you move the bezel inadvertently on a first generation Freak, you accidentally set the time. Well, with the system up and unlocked, I can now move the bezel, because what you're looking at is not a tourbillon, it's a carousel. Invented by Bonabonicsson in 1892, 1893. The carousel was a more robust version of the tourbillon, whereby there's a separate drivetrain for the balance and the carriage itself, so you can move the carriage independently without stopping or crashing the escapement. That's how I'm able to move that minute hand, and you can see the hour hand moving along as I do. This is a fully loomed watch, so it's usable in all light. It's also a heck of a lot thinner than you expect at 12.9 millimeters thick, and the case back of the watch is also a function selector. In this case, pun intended, the caseback winds the watch, and you can see the mainspring through the caseback window. That's sort of an informal power reserve indicator. And you wind the watch by turning the caseback. And by turning the caseback, let me see if I can do it reverse. But by turning the caseback, I can't quite do it from this angle. Oh, there it is. You actually wind the 7-day power reserve of the watch, so it will run for 7 days. UN understanding that this watch, not exactly an everyday timepiece for everyone, is going to sit. It's going to be in a rotation. It's not going to be the only watch. So when you pick it up a week later, it's still beating. Special shout out to the unheralded and often unacknowledged mother of this watch. Carol Forestier-Casapi of Cartier actually designed the original basis for this movement and this watch before she was at Cartier, and ultimately Ulysse Nardin owned the patent, having purchased it and later created the Freak. So give her her due for creating one of the most distinctive watches and the most iconic watch of Ulysse Nardin in the modern era. All right, jumping into the chat box. We could see some are fans, some are not fans of this watch, and you need to see it on the wrist because of the size of it. It's wearable on a wrist like mine because it has a camber to its lugs. It wraps around, so you can see how it wraps around the wrist. It is huge, and in rose gold, it makes a statement. It doesn't make the statement everyone would like to voice off their wrist, so it's not for everyone. But I will say this, there are several versions of the watch, including in white metal. It's hard to resist its charisma and its mystique in person. Oh, right. Jumping back to the chat box, I can see No Mind 7 saying amazing movement, and Willie Pete, her do indeed, awesome design. Big shout out for Carol. And Bent Remy joining from Dallas. All right, RGS Tim, Rolex Batman or Hulk as an investment. My observation has been that the Hulks are trading closer to their retail value, and when in doubt, buy the watch that's trading closer to its retail because that's less of a potential bubble. Now, jumping back to the table, one for all of us. Hard to resist a green watch, or in this case, a green accented watch. This is the original 2013 Aqua Terra Golf, 41.5 millimeters in stainless steel, 8500 coaxial chronometer caliber with a 60-hour power reserve. It features that teak deck striation from top to bottom. I believe I'm getting good at this now. I think that's the fire department outside, not the cops. The more we film in Philadelphia, the more I learn. Now, back to the dial. Teak deck concept striations from top to bottom. It's more of an anthracite than a black when you see it in person. Master's jacket style green. This is the Aquaterra Golf, and this one featuring a wonderful NATO style strap. It does add to the thickness, about 2.5 millimeters, but it also gives it a casual sporty look on the wrist. And the Omega Factory NATO is a wonderful piece with outstanding quality, right down to the branded metal minders. This is a wonderful piece to wear if you want an all-around watch. The rotating bezel Seamasters aren't the most versatile, and the Aquaterra, launched 2002, often gets forgotten between the Bond-style Diver 300s and the flagship Planet Oceans. That should not be. This is a great all-arounder. It should be a flagship and an icon for Omega in its own right. Also available with orange accents, but the green means business. I can see right here, we have Sneaky Moose saying, I don't know why I love that green hand so much. If you want a green hand, but you don't want to pay GMT money, boom, there's your answer. And I could see Angie saying, bye-bye Batman. All right, thanks for taking my advice. Also, bump, Philip A. Winged asking, hey Tim, when will you be in Basel? I'll be there on the 23rd. Tim@thewatchbox.com. Email me closer to the show. I'll have full details. And finally, I have Josie. Watch the unscrewed crown on the Aquaterra. It's all right. I'll be sure to thread it in. I wanted to set it before the show, and unfortunately, I didn't even set it to the correct time. British Racing Green for MG BGT. It's not quite British Racing Green. It's a somewhat lighter green on this watch. I would say it's more of a Kelly green. And then, Mark asked Tim, when will Blancpain update the 50 fathoms to make exhibition caseback and silicone hairspring standard? It's true, the same basic watch has been in production since 2007. I'm going to say in the absence of a Basel showing this year, they're going to need to make a splash. Now, they had a lot of 50 fathoms watches last year, so maybe this will be a refractory model year, but given that Swatch is only doing its own private show outside of Basel, at Zurich without much details available in advance, Blancpain probably needs a pretty big splash because they're not exactly Omega and they're already behind the 8 ball moving outside of Basel. So I would like to say this year, but again, to be determined. Swatch hasn't even given us details of its show. Far be it from me to call novelties. Jumping to a Royal Oak that you can own for somewhat less than the Tourbillon, but a different look. This is an entirely different animal, a different sensibility. 15300 F Series mid-2000s, 39 millimeters rose gold, and on a strap. Note that the strap preserves the coherence of the integrated lugs and bracelet, but it does have a wonderful punchy contrast with the rose gold, and it's nicely corresponded to the color of the dial. They complement each other well. Now, when you throw this one on the wrist, you can see it has a broad stance, but it's not quite as stiff as the bracelet. So if you want a 39 millimeter that wears a bit better on a small wrist, skip the bracelet, go straight with something like this. In-house caliber, 60-hour power reserve, display case back, and swimmable. It's a wonderful watch, but a totally different look than the steel watches, a totally different look than those on the bracelets, and in my opinion, one of the better iterations of the 15300. 15300 OR on a strap. Display case back, of course, you get to see that for which you have paid. Nicely executed, a tough movement, AP in-house. And this watch only 9.4 millimeters thick, still quite slim in profile. Jumping into the box, I can see Thomas B is a fan, and that's Bod saying, love a Royal Oak on leather. Barry BKT saying, that is an awesome AP. Eskimo Joe saying, that's a watch to make a statement. And it's true, because let's face it, you don't need a huge watch to make a statement. You need a dramatic watch to make a statement. And the contrast between rose gold and a black dial and a black strap, as well as between gold and leather, that is dramatic. That is Harley Davidson dramatic. Okay, right here, I can see Naresh Pape of, I believe, Toronto, saying, I have a damaged lug on my Batman. I can live with it, but would you have any advice to fix it or a do not touch policy before the discontinuation of the model? I would say, honestly, live with it for now, and when the watch finally goes in for service at Rolex, ask them if laser welding is an option. That's the only refinishing I would recommend. Otherwise, they're going to sand it down and reduce the metal. If they can correct it with laser welding, and oftentimes with dents they can, that will not reduce the metal. That will fill the dent. And I would only do that with Rolex, again, because who knows better how to refinish those cases? And Rolex laser welding is always going to be a cut above. Plus, you know it's not going to be farmed out. A lot of brands will farm out refinishing when they service watches, not with Rolex. Andrew saying, no FP Journe today. It's true. No FP Journe, no Gran Seco, no Glasuta Original, no Longa, no Nomos, no countries other than Switzerland. So what do I have for you? Well, I have the chronograph of the moment. If you're going to go with the Swiss chrono, this is the one that's got all the hype and the momentum behind it. I do believe the Daytona market is a bubble, but what a bubble. This one's going to go out with a bang and still look good doing so. I believe that these watches will not trade at double retail forever, but they will always be solid investments if you can buy them at or around retail. 5-year warranty when new. Rolex charges a fair price at $12,400 new. 40 millimeters and slim at just over 12.5 millimeters. It's a watch anyone can wear on the wrist. I would never have guessed when this watch debuted at Basel 2016 that in the year 2019 it would be this and the Patek Nautilus as the hottest watches of the moment. Neither model is new. Both are based on ancient platforms, and yet good design is good design, and these are emotional acquisitions. No one needs such a watch. We buy what pull at our heartstrings, and this watch is the ultimate puppeteer. Now you can see it's slim, it's broad, it's handsome, and it's slick. I prefer this version with the black lacquer dial and the black Cerachrom ceramic bezel. It looks bigger on the wrist without actually being bigger. This was the first of the 3-day power reserve Rolexes when it debuted back in 2000. The bezel came along in 2016. It's a wonderful piece, but I will admit it's not my favorite Rolex chronograph. I love the albino Yacht-Master II, white, gold, and platinum, and that will be my first Rolex complication right after I grab myself the Milgauss Z Blue. But I've got a Yacht-Master on the table tonight, and guys, I think it's the one that you would prefer. You guys are steel purists and sports watch purists, so we're talking about the steel Yacht-Master II. Still the most complicated chronograph Rolex has ever made. Yes, that includes the 4113. This is the 2017 to present dial, and you can always tell because it features the combination of Mercedes hand, large triangular index, modified vertical rectangular index at 6, and both hands and indices are polished white gold rather than oxidized blue. So what you're looking at is a watch thinner than you expect, 14 millimeters, and broader lug to lug than you expect at 57 millimeters. It's as broad across the wrist as a big pilot. It's a 44, but it wears nothing like the 44 millimeter deep sea. Of course, you rotate the bezel, and the bezel is part of the movement. You use it to program the countdown timer. The countdown timer is a yacht timer, which is to say it counts down to the start of a match, which is a race within a multi-race regatta or a sailboat race, generally a sailboat race. Now the cool thing about this watch, and it's rarely acknowledged, we're going to turn the bezel back. You turn the bezel, you withdraw the crown, you set the countdown, and then it's permanently programmed. It will revert to that time between 1 and 10 minutes until you reset it. But when you start the chronograph, it's a flyback. A lot of folks don't know that this is a flyback chronograph. Now, what they also don't know is that it's also a fly-forward chronograph. If the watch is past 30 seconds elapsed, the index will jump to the next nearest minute rather than jumping back to the previous minute or the previous time set. So this is an interesting rendition of a flyback, fairly unique. In fact, I would say truly unique. It's the only one like it that I know of. Still a 3-day power reserve, despite all of these through-case fittings. The pushers, the crown, the bezel, it's still 100 meters water resistant. It still has a Cerachrom bezel insert in ceramic. It still features that anti-magnetic hairspring. I love this piece, and something very much like it, albeit with a bit more precious metal, to be perfectly honest, will be my first Rolex complication. Throw that on the wrist. 57 millimeters link to link across the wrist. I would not have expected it to fit. It's flatter than you anticipate, and it's broader than you'd anticipate. Between the two Rolex chronos on the table, this is my choice, and it's not even close. I love motorsports, but I have competitively raced on the water. I have never raced a car. This is something, in theory, I could actually enjoy during club sport. Thinking about buying a Rhodes 19 this spring. Good club scene for those in New England, I hear. And I can see right here, Dustin Van Patten asking, is there a white bezel version? There is. That is the watch that I adore. That is the watch that I will buy from the YachtMaster II line. That is the white, gold, and platinum model. It has no bezel insert. It's a platinum bezel. So that is your white bezel option, but it also costs about 3 times as much as that watch. So I will finagle something to make it more affordable than that, but if you were to buy it new, expensive watch. Jumping straight in, I could see, Tim, you've never highway raced. I'm not going to incriminate myself on YouTube. The cops are into that these days, but no comment. And I can see right here, Pet Shop Boy, black versus white dial Daytona. Black. I like the coherence of it. Let's jump into what is undoubtedly the crescendo watch. Now I got one more cool piece for you before we end. This is a watch that's hugely underrated. Originally priced at $23,000 in 2010, this is the Piaget Polo 45 Chronograph Limited Edition. Now this is a true polo, harking back to the 1970s polo, the namesake of the line, with its Piaget-designed lateral guidron. They continue from the dial, where you can see the rendered and polished steel, and they continue across the strap with metal inserts on the strap and then molded guidron across the strap. So this is very much like the original Polo, not the 2016 Polo S, which has very little in common with the original. This is true to form. Now it's titanium grade 5, feather light, and only 12.4 millimeters thick. Hang on, did I say 12.4? I meant 10.6. That's right, it's a full 2 millimeters thinner than a Daytona, with a movement 5.6 millimeters thin. Piaget integrated caliber 880P, 50-hour power reserve, dual time, vertical clutch column wheel chronograph, stop seconds, quick set date, all of that in 100 meters water resistant. This was a 500-piece limited series and a Royal Oak offshore killer. You can see that Piaget caliber on the case back with its column wheel. Now, what I love about this watch is that they make adjusting the GMT super easy. 24-hour dial, and you adjust it with a case side pusher. Great dial depth, a watch that for about $11,500 is well priced to give you a high horology timepiece for a mid-level luxury watch price. Remember, a Rolex Daytona 12.4, you can pick this up for $11,500, and that's about half the original price. A lovely watch with a wonderful wrist presence. It also has a cambered case that makes it very friendly on a smaller wrist. If you want a half-price Royal Oak offshore killer, this is a wonderful option. Don't even think twice if you're trying to negotiate between this and an Hublot Big Bang, even a Unico. This is what I would pick. Okay, jumping from that Piaget, I'm going to jump to a watch that is unarguably the grail of grails on our table tonight. The 2002 to 2006 caliber 2600B Omega de Ville Central Tourbillon. The first of the COSC chronometer certified Central Tourbillon. This one was made in only a few dozen copies a year from 02 to 06. 38.7 millimeters in diameter with a central tourbillon. You can see there are overlapping sapphire discs and a caseback setting system, so there's actually a pinion underneath the bezel. You can see how broad the bezel is that drives the hands. They're driven from the outside, not from the center. That's how the tourbillon, with its blued over coil hairspring, beats away at the center. The hands are driven from the edge of the movement. They're set from the back of the case. And you can see this Maurice Grimm tourbillon caliber features that same caseback setting system as the tourbillon automatique he designed for Audemars Piguet back in 1986. Now the watch is slim. It's under 13 millimeters thick, which is to say it's fairly svelte. You use the crown exclusively for winding. You set exclusively with the caseback. There's a platinum winding mass in the back of the case, so it's a very efficient winding system, and it is an automatic winding tourbillon. You could see that there's a hand-engraved rayon-style plate underneath the balance that recalls the montre de sable that actually presaged these watches. Designed by Dominique Loiseau, they inspired the Omega Tourbillon, which was released in its original form in 1994 for the centenary of the Omega brand. So you can see that nod to Dominique Loiseau, the late great Dominique Loiseau, just underneath the tourbillon itself. A watch that was my grail watch during the 90s as a kid, and I have to admit it remains a horological hero of mine today. In white gold, I'm going to throw this one on the wrist. And then, frankly, we got to be done because I can't top that. Omega de Ville Central Tourbillon, caliber 2600B, white gold, just under 39 millimeters, and that is a wonderful fit. Would I like to own this thing? Do I really need to answer that? Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for everyone who participated, got up late, stayed up, or got up early, stayed up late. Thanks to you for making the best job in the world possible. Thanks to my crew for making it technically feasible. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.